Okay, we're going to go ahead and get started. As folks log on, like we've mentioned, say a quick hello in the chat. Let us know where you're joining from. It is my pleasure and honor to welcome you all to our March Centering Servingness webinar. I'm Judy Marquez-Quillama, and I serve as the Associate Vice Provost for Faculty Development. On behalf of Faculty Affairs and HSI initiatives here at the University of Arizona, we welcome you. We begin today's webinar by respectfully acknowledging the University of Arizona is on the land and territories of Indigenous peoples. Today, Arizona is home to 22 federally recognized tribes, with Tucson being home to the Orem and the Yaqui. Committed to diversity and inclusion, the university strives to build sustainable relationships with sovereign Native nations and Indigenous communities through education offerings, partnership, and community service. Today, we work to more deeply understand and go beyond land acknowledgements with the 4 R's, as noted in the webinar title, with our honored guests from the Indigenous Resilience Center. I'd like to talk first a little about the notion of servingness. When considering this term, we draw on Dr. Gina Garcia's extensive body of work. Dr. Garcia's research helps to inform this webinar series, which features faculty and staff who engage in scholarship and servingness efforts that honor the cultures and the lived experiences of Latinx, Black, Indigenous, and underrepresented students and communities. In coming together, our goals of the series are threefold: to spotlight current scholarship, offering examples of the rich ways in which servingness is enacted by faculty and staff across the institution, to learn together about engaging in these efforts, and to build knowledge, addressing the question, what are the next steps needed to build institutional capacity around HSI servingness? We'll share in the chat the link for all of the webinars that we've held over the last 3 years. They remain there for you as a resource. Monique and I will watch the chat throughout in the Q&A box. We encourage you to pose questions that we'll invite you to ask at the end of the session. But I'd like to first welcome our esteemed guests. Dr. Carletta Chief is Dene and a professor and extension specialist in the Department of Environmental Science and director of the Indigenous Resilience Center. As an extension specialist, she works to bring relevant water science to Native American communities in a culturally sensitive manner. 2 of her primary tribal projects are the Pyramid Lake Paiute Tribe Climate Adaptation and Traditional Knowledge Project and Gold King Mine Spill Dene Exposure Project. In partnership with Dene College, Dr. Chief leads the NSF Indigenous Food, Energy, and Water Security and Sovereignty Program, whose vision is to develop a diverse workforce with intercultural awareness and expertise in sustainable food, energy, water systems, specifically through off-grid technologies to address the lack of safe water, energy, and food security in Indigenous communities. Torrin Anderson is the outreach coordinator with the Indigenous Resilience Center. For over 25 years, Torrin has worked in the field of education with a focus on environmental education and community engagement. Torrin has developed environmental education programs for Environmental Education Exchange, social justice programs as the director of the Legacy of Japanese Incarceration Project, and published over 50 books for children as a freelance author. Currently within the Institute for Energy Solutions, Torrin is working on 2 grant projects: the Sustainable Bioeconomy for Arid Regions Project and the Indigenous Food, Energy, and Water Security and Sovereignty Project. And finally, Daniel Sestiaga Jr. is the program manager for the Indigenous Resilience Center. He's a member of the Fort Yuma Quetzal Indian Tribe of Arizona. He joins the Indigenous Resilience Center from the Tohono O'odham Community College, where he managed the college dual enrollment program, the Braiding Success Initiative funded by AT&T through the American Indian College Fund, and served as the co-principal investigator on the A Student's Journey program funded by the Agnes Nelms Howard program. He served as the college's representative to the Arizona Tribal College and University's Dual Enrollment Council within the Office of Indian Education, and has served as a member of the Arizona Indian Education Advisory Council to State Superintendent of Public Instruction, Kathy Hoffman, since 2020. So please help me welcome our guests. And I will turn it over to you, I believe, Dr. Chief, to get us started.
Great. Thank you, Dr. Kiamba. And today we're excited to be here today to talk about serving through going beyond the land acknowledgement with the 4 R's. First, I would like to introduce myself. I am Bitterwater, born for near the water, and I'm a citizen of the Navajo Nation, and this is how I define myself as an Indigenous professor and scientist. Much of my work comes from my upbringing in that I was raised within a coal mine community where I witnessed the degradation of land for coal mining. I was raised without electricity or running water, and I watched my family suffer from black lung disease. This experience gave me the drive to get a college degree and use my education to help my people and Native America to address environmental injustices and work towards restoration to support the resilience of Indigenous communities. My lived experiences as a Native American woman and as a first-generation college graduate motivate the work that I do at the University of Arizona, particularly in serving Native American communities. At the University of Arizona, I'm able to serve through my position as an extension specialist, which is to bridge the land grant mission to serve Native American communities to address environmental challenges. My extension programs that I built since 2011 center around climate change, mining, native water science, food, energy, water systems, and STEM education. Working with tribes requires developing relationships built on trust, using culturally appropriate methods, on the ground, face-to-face contact, and obtaining required local, tribal, community, and government approval. My extension work includes numerous meetings, tribal consultations, workshops, and presentations within the community. The conception of the Indigenous Resilience Center, or IRES, has been built upon many collaborations across the University of Arizona and Indigenous partners in Arizona and across the Western United States. The Indigenous Resilience Center was conceptualized through a program that Kathy Jacobs had developed called the Native Nations Climate Adaptation Program, which was funded by the Howry program, and my extension programs. My extension programs first started working with Dr. Joe Hiller, who was the predecessor of Trent Tigerstrom, to lead tribal extension in the cooperative extension, leveraging various programs that were funded by the USDA, NSF, and many others in my tribal watershed extension program. In addition, I am part of the Superfund Research Center, which I developed early on to address mighty impacts through Raina Mayer, who is the PI of the Superfund Research Program. In addition, I collaborated many times with Sharon Megdal, for example, developing the water conference on focusing on tribal perspectives back in 2014. I also was part of the Center for Environmental Indigenous Research, and together with Superfund Research Center and the Southwest Environmental Health Sciences Center, developed a project to address the Gold Key mine spill that occurred on the Navajo Nation with Dr. Paloma Beamer and Dr. Stephanie Carroll. And through this project, we received a lot of interest from students who wanted to work with Indigenous communities, but needed training to understand how to work with Indigenous communities. And through the leadership of Kim Ogden, who took interest in this training, we were able to secure a $3 million grant from the National Science Foundation called the Indigenous Food, Energy, and Water Security and Sovereignty. To sustain Indigenous youth, Torrin Anderson and Kara Chopra did extensive outreach across campus to brainstorm on how to sustain Indigenous youth. As a result, the birth of Indigenous Resilience Center occurred through the three champions that assisted me and believed in this dream to have the center. Tony Massaro, who's the director of the Agnes Powery Program in Environmental and Social Justice. Kathy Jacobs, the director of Center for Climate Adaptation Science and Solutions. And Jim Beiser, the former director of the Arizona Institute for Resilience. So we combined the Native Nations Climate Adaptation Program with Indigenous youth through the support of these three champions. We submitted a proposal for IRES. IRES's vision is that we see a world in which Indigenous communities are thriving and adaptable to meet environmental and societal changes. Our mission is to center Indigenous ways of knowing and to co-design environmental solutions and training the next generation of community leaders. We have 4 goals. First is to build trust with tribal partners and the University of Arizona Research Network. Number 2, develop an IRES project that highlights faculty expertise. Number 3, establish an IRES network of trusted affiliates and allies. And number 4, create an efficient, communicative, and coordinated team to implement center operations. Through many efforts of advocacy, reaching out, and communication, which involve many centers of excellence across campus and conversations, we're able to start up the Indigenous Resilience Center. This includes the Native faculty who provided early on brainstorming with regards to IRES, support from the president of the university, Dr. Robbins, and Levi Esguera, who is the VP for Native American Advancement and Tribal Engagement, the Office of the Provost, who assisted with the SIFI efforts, including assistance from Dr. Karen Francis McGay, who's the VP for Native American Initiative, and then the Research, Innovation, and Impact, which is where IRES is housed under. In addition, we received Provost investment funds and presidential investment funds to kickstart a lot of our programs within the last year. And I want to remind you that we've only been in existence for 2 years, but all of our staff have only been here at the University of Arizona in the last year. So we are very young. I describe our center as a seed that is being watered by tribal leaders into a fruit that they desire to harvest. There are many Native American centers of excellence across campus that have existed prior to IRES and have built excellent programs with Native nations. And so early on, we reached out to these centers to get input, to get advice, and to get feedback on the development of our center. Since 2022, we have built a team of 8. 50% of our team is Native American, and we have 3 faculty, 2 who have joined in the last year. Dr. Michael Johnson, who's Hopi, In SNRE, Dr. Joseph Hoover, who is an ENVS. We also have Danny Visayaga, who is the program manager, Torrin Anderson, the outreach coordinator, Bernice Rodriguez, who is the program coordinator, and two students, Lozave Teles Goodman and Javier Aguiniga, who's an undergrad in the College of Public Health. So together we work really hard as a team towards accomplishing our mission and our vision. We also have an advisory board who's predominantly Native Americans, all who have experience in building some kind of center or program combined with the sciences and environment, cooperative extension, and traditional knowledges and grassroots organizing. So we're really proud to work with all of these knowledge holders and tribal leaders. We also reached out to get support and guidance from April Tidhorn in Consulting, who is an Indigenous entrepreneur that works on strategic development to really decolonize and indigenize our work and our strategic mission within the development of IRES. Our thrust across research, teaching, and outreach is first in research to investigate the ways in which we can increase Indigenous resilience, teaching and designing STEM courses that are specifically tailored towards resilience, and then outreach and service to partner with tribes collaboratively to identify community-driven resilience goals and priorities. Why now and why resilience? Because there's been a major transformation in social and environmental justice, and the University of Arizona is uniquely positioned to support Indigenous resilience, especially within the Arizona Institute for Resilience. There's ongoing support for tribal outreach and engagement through the Native American initiative. The U of A strategic plan includes Native American goals, and there are important work across campus that are already addressing environmental challenges that tribes face, and that our work within our center is driven by the priorities specifically set by tribal leaders and communities. And that is critical for us in working with Levi Esguerra and Dr. Francis Bigay. And why the University of Arizona? Because of the land grant mission. We are a leader in water policy, climate change, and resilience research. AIR is doing relevant tribal research. The Howry program created the Tribal Resilience Initiative. The Biden administration is committed to tribal resilience. And then particularly the pandemic included specific response to address the challenges that tribes were facing. But we do all this work within Indigenous framework because it is important to center Indigenous ways of knowing and that there are established Indigenous processes of research that are producing new knowledge that is centered around community healing and capacity building. Indigenizing means that we include Indigenous perspectives, values, and cultural understandings in the work that we do. We position the Indigenous ways of knowing to inform our work, and we abide by cultural protocols. In decolonizing, we don't mean to reject Western knowledge or research, but rather it's about centering Indigenous concerns and the world views to know and understand theory and research from Indigenous perspectives for Indigenous purposes. And you don't need to be Indigenous to do this. There are many tools already across campus, across the United States, that are publicly available to all people to learn about how to decolonize and indigenize the work that they do. There are many photos here that show the work that you can access, including many which are locally available on campus, including city Native American research training, the Native Nations training on Native know-how programs, the Indigenous Peoples Law and Policy, and many books. One I want to encourage everybody to check out is the January and Tucson courses, which are a great boot camp. So look out for those resources to do some training around decolonizing and indigenizing research. But how we do our work at the Indigenous Resilience Center to be a good relative, which is how we think about serving our communities, is centered around the 4 R's. The 4 R's are values that exist across Native American studies and research, and developed by Native intellectuals that have been doing this work for many, many decades. So the Indigenous Resilience Center has selected these 4 R's to center our work, which is responsibility, relevance, reciprocity, and respect. First is relationship. Relationship guides the pathway to meaningful and deep collaboration and connection. Respect. Respect must be at the heart of our work. Transparency, consistent communication, our respect for Indigenous place, Indigenous beliefs and values, history, and language are avenues for the respect. Reciprocity. Reciprocity means that we ground our work and commitment to Indigenous communities. By breaking the stigma of research and institution, IRES recognizes and prioritizes the cyclical nature of collaboration and emphasizes the need for balanced cooperation with Indigenous partners. Responsibility. It is the responsibility of IRES to elevate Indigenous sovereignty, self-determination, and Indigenous ways of knowing through our work, both internally at the U of A and externally. It is the responsibility of IRES to care and nurture for our relationships and collaborative efforts that we have and or will be in place in the future. So we use a decolonized community engagement framework that is set within the 7th generation model. And through our different conversations with Indigenous experts, such as Dr. Ted Hahola and many others, we center our work to ensure that we engage respectfully, we obtain approval, we co-produce all our work, and we co-disseminate the work, and we give back, whether that's through training or data access. And we follow the care principles, particularly with respect to Indigenous data sovereignty, following a lot of the work that our colleague, Dr. Stephanie Carroll, does on Indigenous data sovereignty, which is to ensure that the data that's co-produced is findable, accessible, interoperable, and reusable, and that it has collective benefit for the communities, that Indigenous communities have authority to control, and that we do it in a responsible way with ethics. So now I want to share a few examples of how we serve our Indigenous communities. First is that we do ongoing tribal outreach that is consistent and involves creativity. For example, participate in Shiprock Ag Days that the Indian Cooperative Extension does every year. Being creative in that work, for example, we did a sustainability fair in Shiprock, demoing the various technologies that we're involved with and working with Native American technicians, for example, the PV warriors. We also teach at tribal colleges and universities, and we involve our students who develop these learning curriculum and do the training. So it's great professional development for them. In the process, we're able to contribute to workforce development of tribal college students within the food, energy, and water sectors. And we continually do training and outreach at the local tribal government level while including our students. I want to share a specific example of how we responded to the Gold King mine spill. This spill occurred in 2015, releasing 3 million gallons of acid mine drainage into the San Juan River, which Navajo farmers depend on. And when the EPA came in to do a risk assessment, their perception was to assess the risk based on recreation. But for the Diné people living in this area, their reality is that they use the river in many more ways than just recreation. So the risk assessment needed to be more accurate. So through a multi-university collaboration led by myself and Dr. Paloma Beamer, we were able to quantify over 40 different ways in which the Navajo farmers use the river, and created an inspiration to think about ways to transform food, energy, water security, and to collaborate across tribes, agency, and universities. In this work, we decolonized and indigenized our work, working with the Diné Medicine Men's Association. We did our science, but in our dissemination, we made sure to use the Diné health model as a guide to disseminate the work. So I was sharing earlier that this project really inspired Indigenous youth. Within Indigenous youth, our goal is to develop a diverse workforce of students who have expertise in food, energy, and water systems, who are versed in how to develop and operate different technologies, specifically off-grid, and to have intercultural awareness. Through this work, during the pandemic, we were able to co-design a new system based on an earlier design that was developed by Dr. Carnicola and Dr. Bob Arnold to design a household water treatment system so that Navajo families living remotely can be able to treat their water for drinking water purposes and have it locally available. But one of the things that we made sure to do was to get input from the people. Do they want these technologies, and is it useful to them? So in this work, we do not only the training, but we also do focus groups to understand the perceptions of water technologies. And this work is in collaboration with Dr. Andrew Curley, who's a Diné professor in geography. So the third example I want to share is that we also ensure that we reach out to our young children, because they are the leaders of tomorrow, and it is critical to reach out to them, to share with them all this great work on sustainability and environmental resilience solutions. So currently we're working with Star School, which is an off-grid school that primarily serves Native American students. And Star School represents service to all my relations. We work with Dr. Valerie Shirley, who is a Diné professor in education, who leads the Indigenous Teachers Education Program to decolonize and develop place-based curriculum around food, energy, water systems. So those are the examples that I wanted to share about how we serve our Native American communities by being a good relative to them. But all along the way, we involve our students. And now I want to share with you how we engage our students in this process so that they can also be a good relative to Indigenous communities in their work around environmental resilience. First is that our students do internships within Indigenous communities. For example, building aquaponic systems, doing water surveys, working on different types of remote technologies for greenhouses or water systems and solar panels, all in collaboration with many different faculty in engineering, science, and American Indian Studies. Another example is we do spring break immersion with our students, where they spend a week up to a week in a Native American community, for example, the Navajo Nation, to learn about how it is to live on the Navajo Nation without access to electricity, running water, and seeing the environmental challenges they face, as well as talking to tribal leaders and tribal environmental managers. We also have on campus a PhD minor that is open to all students. And in this PhD minor, the students get an opportunity to learn about food and drinking water systems, both at the systems level and unit operations and fundamental level. Dr. Vicky Carnicola teaches a chemical environmental engineering capstone course that brings together students across many disciplines to co-design and create off-grid technologies to address environmental challenges facing tribes. And then all of this is under the foundation of understanding Native American communities, which are classes offered in American Indian Studies. Now we are working to reach out to you. And the Indigenous Resilience Center is doing different types of trainings, webinars, and seminars. And now I want to share that with you. Currently, as a result of Provost investment funds, we are doing a training series called Doing Environmental Research in Tribal Communities. The webinar series and actually in-person training is focused on the pillars of what we value in working with Indigenous communities. For example, Indigenous evaluation, Indigenous data sovereignty, decolonized education, doing community-based tribal research, working with tribal colleges, and mentoring Indigenous students. All of these trainings are led by University of Arizona faculty. So there are many people on campus that have these expertise, and the Indigenous Resilience Center is working to make that highlighted and share across campus. We also have an ongoing seminar series called Native Voices in STEM. This semester, we're focused on food sovereignty. Last semester, we were focused on water. So different departments host these seminar series, and we bring in Indigenous faculty professionals to share their work. So if your department is interested in hosting Native Voices in STEM, please let us know. We also have visiting scholars. This is funded and made possible by the Howry program, as well as the Provost Investment Fund. And last semester, we had a First Nations Indigenous soil biogeochemist, Dr. Melissa Arcand. And then this semester, we have Dr. Ted Hahola, who does Indigenous Design and Planning Institute. So look out on our website if you're interested in Indigenous planning. When Dr. Ted Hahola is on campus, we'll have a seminar and many activities with him. Another example is we bring tribal colleges and tribal organizations to campus and provide immersion in the communities and bring them to campus. So we'll be holding a Native Youth Alliance annual gathering focused on engaging communities for a thriving future. And that'll be actually next week. So we're excited because the goal of Native Youth Alliance is to build a diverse workforce at the nexus of food, energy, water systems, developing Indigenous curriculum, and supporting Native American students in their pathways to their education and careers. So please visit our website. Our website is at resilient.arizona.edu. And you can contact us through our website or follow us on Twitter. We also are on Instagram, and our email is shown here. We look forward to hearing from you. Ajehe, gracias, and arigato gozaimashita. Thank you. And at this time, I would like to invite my team to be part of a panel and Q&A to engage in a dialogue with you. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Chief. Folks, we are going to take questions. You can either put them in the Q&A box or raise your hand using the little raise hand button, and Monique and I will invite you to pose your questions. And we certainly have time to entertain questions from our audience. One of the things that I know I sent to all of you, the kind of the closing question that maybe you can get us started. And Torin and Daniel, please jump in as well. During these webinars, we've been asking everybody, what does it mean to institutionalize servingness? What does it mean to institutionalize this work that you all are engaged in as well? Particularly as we think about working within and across communities of color, within and across minoritized communities. So I'd love to hear from you all the ways in which we can continue to push and do this work from really a systemic and institutionalized lens.
Thank you for that question, Judy. I think in terms of the institutionalization of our work, it's really reaching out to champions and allies that believe in the work that you do, and advocacy, and continually sharing our knowledge and being able to share our work across campus. And I really appreciate that collaborative environment across campus. But I want to have Torin chime in because he was actually instrumental in that early on the groundwork through Indigenous youth, and we were brainstorming on how to sustain Indigenous youth. And so he had a lot of conversations with people across campus to reach out and ask for help and ask for a partnership. So I want to give it over to him and let him chime in on that. Torin?
Well, thank you, Dr. Chief. Hello, everybody. And that was such a great summation. I can't believe how succinct you make it, all the work that's been done. Yeah, it's been really amazing to be part of this, and I'm glad that we're kind of able to be featured in this series. I think in terms of things being institutionalized, the example of Native Voices in STEM is really powerful because it started just as a program with IndigiFuse, so with the students, we would have different Indigenous scientists talk about their work, but also talking about their journey and the struggles, and having time at the end of a presentation for people to connect with them and ask questions. And so this program that started just as an internal thing for IndigiFuse became institutionalized and has been taken up by different departments now in its 5th year. And I put the link in the chat. You can see all the past conversations that have taken place. But both Dr. Chief and Danny have been so good about making sure we're out in the community. And one other event that just launched recently is Dr. Chief started up a program where we're having Native Fuse Alliance students share their research. So it's also students getting to connect with each other. And, in talking with community members and in everything with IndigiFuse, this process of like being able to see someone, particularly someone who's like you or where you're from, sharing their journey has been incredibly powerful. So we've had people say, I remember when Dr. Chief came to my classroom, and now I'm the lead hydrologist at Navajo Nation. And we're hoping that also with these younger students sharing their work for their communities, that will kind of trickle out and keep going. So it's been an amazing process to be part of. Thanks.
Thank you both. Dr. Joseph Hoover also posted a question in the chat. So we just unmuted you if you'd like to pose your question to the group, and welcome. I know you also play a significant role.
Sure, happy to answer my question. I'm a little biased in asking it, but I'm just kind of curious, Danny and Torin and Carletta, sort of what you see as the biggest success of IRES to date. There's so many things that are underway and there's lots of great stuff coming, but I'm just kind of curious what you think we've done really well so far.
I can start out the answer. Well, I think one of the biggest successes is bringing faculty like yourself to the University of Arizona who are doing amazing work in Indigenous communities, and also increasing the number of Native American faculty in STEM. And the University of Arizona actually graduates the largest number of Native American PhD and MS students in STEM, but that is not reflected in our faculty. And so we're proud to say that we are increasing that number through the Indigenous Resilience Center. But I want to have Danny chime in as well, because he is the engine behind IRES and moving it forward and being a leader for us to basically manage all the things that we're doing and being creative at the same time. So Danny?
Thank you, Dr. Chief. So from my perspective, I guess doing the work within the center and, helping bring together a team, part of, I think, one of the biggest successes that we have or have had is really just to come together and really think through the strategic planning process. It was a long effort to do it, but when we kind of stepped back and really said, assert kind of our identity and what does that mean, and how do we really center Indigenous ways of knowing, I think we really had to challenge ourselves to think through our vision, our mission, our core values as a center. And to me, I think that was a very big leap forward, to be able to recognize really our purpose, how we approach our work, and the values that we really kind of engage in order to be able to do our work. So I think that for me, that was a big success. And also just bringing on and adding people to this just powerhouse of a team, our staff, our students, and of course, bringing in more faculty just to be able to do this work, to me has been a great success over the past year. Because when we got started, Torin and Kara and everybody who's been a part of the project with IndigiFuse were there, but for a while under IRES, it was Dr. Chief and I. So it's nice to have definitely team members who really understand the work and understand the commitment really within that we're making when we're engaging with our tribal communities.
Thank you, Joseph, for the question. Dr. Sharon Collins, I hope I'm pronouncing your last name correctly. We have unmuted you and welcomed you on the panel as well. Please feel free to pose your question.
Sure, thank you. And you did pronounce my name correctly, so thank you. I was just curious, related to the question that you initially asked, what Carletta and Danny and Torin see as the major barriers for Indigenous students, both undergraduate and graduate, to pursue their education here at the University of Arizona.
I can start that conversation. I think I think I wouldn't say it's necessarily a barrier, but it's an attribute that needs understanding, is that Native American students are very connected to their communities, and they have commitments and responsibilities to their families, to their communities. Some students are designated leaders by their families. They're designated to be knowledge holders. And so their pathway towards obtaining their education is going to be much different than the traditional student. And so there's some understanding needed to ensure that there's flexibility for students to be able to abide by their commitments, which is very related to their health as an individual as well. And so there needs to be understanding for that. And then in addition, many Native American students are first generation students. And so I hear sometimes faculty saying, I don't want to hold your hand, or, I don't want to micromanage the student. But sometimes you need to hold an Indigenous student's hand through the process, because they don't have somebody in their family that has gone to college or can, give them some home advice at home about doing undergraduate research. So there's a lot more mentoring needed to guide an Indigenous students through academia. And so those are just some two things that I think about right off the top of my head. But we're really glad and very appreciative of Danny's experience in the tribal college. So prior to coming here, he's been at the Tohono O'odham Community College for over 10 years. So he has another understanding of what it means to mentor tribal college students, which many do transfer to four-year universities as well. Danny.
And I thank you, Dr. Chief, because I still teach at TOCC. I still teach public health courses, so I still adjunct and I teach tonight, and it's fun. But it's exciting because this is a very big conversation about different barriers. And one of the things that I have consistently seen from a university standpoint is the digital divide. Because oftentimes when we're getting into this conversation about how do we get students to transfer from a tribal college to a university, or if they're coming in as first year freshmen, how do we get them to enroll and matriculate successfully from their community to Tucson or online? It's hard. It's a tough conversation because oftentimes they are first generation college students, and the university doesn't do a very good job of disseminating information in a way that can be understood by our communities, our families, and sometimes our students. So, when I've done this work, even as a student services professional, we often said or have seen, well, it's on our website, or you can email this person. But if a person doesn't have access to internet, or if they don't have the equipment to even access that, or technology to even access that information, it makes it very hard. I will say that coming in as an undergraduate student, I was one of those people. I was one of those students as a first gen, didn't have access to technology. And so when I applied to the University of Arizona, I had to submit an old school paper application and fill it out and send it off, and hopefully somebody received it. And really thankful that our admissions team was very responsive in that nature. You probably all know Catalina Carlos. She was one of my main people that kind of got me through the process. But if it wasn't for those dedicated individuals to essentially help guide us in our pathway, I would be lost. And even here, even going through the system as a master's student, if I didn't have those faculty mentors, those professional mentors to help guide me in this process, I don't think I would be as successful as I would be. So I think I see it really from a couple of standpoints. It's a social aspect, but also acknowledging that there is a digital divide amongst our communities.
Thank you. I really appreciate that.
Thank you, Dr. Collins.
We're going to continue the conversation about students and really centering the work with them. Dr. Adrian Arroyo posed another question in the chat about working with undergraduate students in particular. Adrian, do you want to ask your question?
Thank you very much. I think there have been some conversations on it, but I would like to know what has been the most successful way to engage undergraduate students in working with the community, and more specifically with the communities that you work with. Yeah, this in the context of many times STEM students and companies are willing to attract those students, and sometimes it is hard for us to get them to work with communities and the type of work that you do at the center. Thanks, Dr. Kiyama.
Okay, great, thank you. I think in terms of Indigenous undergraduate students and Indigenous graduate students, I think many of them I have found really want to work with their own communities. And I've, heard, in my time here, statements around like, oh, that's not cutting edge research, or that's not within our purview of our department. But there are many Indigenous students that want to do work with their Indigenous community. So I think it's important to support that because it drives them, it motivates them, it keeps them going towards accomplishing their educational goals. In terms of other undergraduate and graduate students, I think they have to want to work with Indigenous communities and sincerely be committed to being part of that process, because some of it can be hard to do. When we talk about positionality through our trainings with Dr. Valerie Shirley, positioning yourself and having those hard conversations about why Indigenous communities don't have trust in research. And a lot of that is around stigma associated with bad research practices, or even within the history of the United States with historical trauma. So there's some really tough conversations that we have. And so a student has to want to work within Indigenous communities and want to learn about how to work with them. And I think other students can be exposed to it indirectly through like Native Voices in STEM, which is offered within a department for all people in the department. So I would say those are probably the range of how we are able to engage different students.
Thank you very much.
So there's a couple of questions floating around. I want to point your attention to the Q&A box. Maybe you can, if one of you is available to answer that one in that box itself. Professor Tony Massaro also posed a question, and I'm going to go ahead and read that one for her because she needs to stay muted for the moment. So thank you, Tony, for your question. Might the U of A establish a version of a public service student academy with emphasis on the kind of hands-on service and cultural education and training that Dr. Chief's program models, or even a service pod for all graduates? Turn that over to all of you.
The Indigenous Resilience Center, we are working towards that kind of multi-pronged engagement of students with communities. And we want to sustain that further. Much of it was done through Indigenous use, which we are in the last year of funding, but we're finding ways to try to keep the internships going and the spring break immersion trips. And I think those components will be sustained through conversations with our colleagues across campus in terms of how to institutionalize that. We haven't yet institutionalized those, but we want to just, basically put different pots of funds together to keep it going. And also different collaborations, like for example, I have a project with First Nations, and we are talking about maybe taking that spring break immersion globally to First Nations, also with Dr. Melissa Arcon. She's invited us to go visit the communities in Canada. And then our Indigenous Indigenous Youth alumni who are working in Mexico have invited us. So we're thinking about, broadening that community engagement to Indigenous communities internationally. So we're open to how we can do that across campus, and would love to think about that kind of student academy. And I'll give it over to Danny to answer the chat box Q&A about our Native Fuse Alliance gathering, which is a really hot event right now. So, Danny?
That was already done, Dr. Chief. I already responded. But so there was a question about the Native Youth Alliance. So we are actually at capacity for in-person, but we do have some room for virtual attendance. It is a little bit limited because we're only doing virtual for our big room. But if you do have or would still be open to that, please go ahead and send me an email, and I will definitely put my information in the chat box. So you all can, if you want to chime in virtually, we do have some room there. There is another Q&A in here, and I was just reading that as well.
Yeah, we're just about at time, but I don't know if any of you just want to briefly touch on any future plans for interinstitutional collaboration, launching at an international or national level, particularly, and this person writes, in terms of recent blow to climate change and Alaska Native sovereignty and Biden enabling the Willow Project. Could Indigenous be Biden or Deb Haaland's be in their ear? So it's a big question.
Great question. Yeah, great question. Yeah, I think that's another reason why IRES started was because there's a lot of things happening with the Biden administration. And we certainly can't do it all. We've only been here a year, but we're certainly have that as a goal to respond to many of these calls that are going out and to support a lot of the nonprofit, small grassroots Indigenous organizations out there who don't necessarily always have the capacity to go after a lot of these federal grants. And then working with administration like Dr. Catwell and in regards to working with our federal relations department to go to DC and try to inform, EPA, USDA, NSF about our work, and just like engaging with them in that conversation and sharing best practices and the challenges that we face in doing our work. But also working with all our colleagues on campus. All of our colleagues across campus have different expertise. They have time possibly to work with Indigenous communities. So we have a goal to engage our colleagues and be a gateway to work with Indigenous communities. Thank you.
Thank you all. Oh, Torrin, were you going to jump in?
Oh, sorry. I know we're at time. It was such a great point. I just wanted to say these ideas are so amazing, and we're really looking to build capacity and keep growing. And we just sent out a newsletter yesterday with some updates about what's going on. And Dr. Betsy Woodhouse wrote back saying, like, wow, it's amazing how much is going on with just such a small team. And we really couldn't do that without the support of U of A, but also, AIR in particular, and the Howey program in particular. There's so many people that have our back and are so excited about this. So just thank you so much to everyone who supported IRES. It's really made this possible.
Thank you. Well, thank you all for making time today and sharing a little bit about the journey and the evolution of the work, the future of the work, the ways in which we can all engage more deeply. It's been a privilege to work with all of you in different ways. And so I'm so grateful that you were here today and that you were able to share. We will post the link for the recording on the HSI Initiative's website. We'll also share it with our panelists so that it can hopefully be linked to the IRES website if that's a useful resource. We have one more webinar coming up in April, and then we'll close out for the year. And before we log off, I want to, of course, thank Monique Beltran, who is the everything behind the scenes. Nothing happens without Monique. So thank you, Monique, for everything. And I hope you all have a good afternoon.